this is when things that end in aholic happen. So shopaholic, alcoholic, that's when things that end in anonymous happen. Overeaters Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that all of these activities are about trying to get the elephant to stop following. Okay? You're trying to figure out, how do I get this pain that keeps going wherever I am to stop being there? And when I buy the new clothes, I feel good for a while, right? Okay? Now the thing is that when you regress, that has a new problem. Remember we talked about when you suppress one behavior, another one comes up? Well, that's what we call the spike. So, we've got the stress that's happening, you get the regressive behavior that occurs as somebody is trying to figure out how to, Mommy, take care of me, right? You understand? But that creates a whole new set of problems now, okay? And that's why you got to go to something that ends in anonymous, okay? Because you spiked into something else. So now it's not just that I'm stressed, now I'm a stressed alcoholic. Now I'm not just stressed, I'm a stressed gambler who's in debt over my head, okay? So the gambling or the going to the casino wasn't necessarily the problem. The result of that became the fact that I'm in debt over my head. Now, guess what happens to the stress level when you got people coming to break your kneecaps? Because you can't pay the bills. Or they're repossessing your house. Or, you understand? It's all of those kinds of things fitting together. So, if we want to prevent the spike in the behaviors of the folks that we're working with, we have to prevent the regression in the behavior. Does that make sense? So we want them to behave like competent adults, making good decisions, managing their emotions, you know, all those kinds of things. Okay? So we're going to try and get people to not be like little kids, not be dependent, not be all those other things. The only way to make that regression not happen is to bring the stress levels down. Does that make sense? We've got to help people learn how to manage stress. Another thing we don't teach people. Another thing we don't teach people. So we don't teach people how to have friends, how to be a good friend, how to manage social relationships. We don't teach them the good social skills that everybody else supposedly needs in order to function. Of course, I've seen some people lately who have, they seem to be functioning, but they have terrible social skills, and they all seem to work at the customer service counter. And we don't teach people how to manage stress. Now here's a little piece of information for you. We did some research and found out that folks who have significant intellectual developmental disabilities scored 6 times higher on standardized stress scales. 600% as much stress as you. Now think about it for just a moment. How many things are they dependent on from us? Let's go around the room. Jen, what is somebody who has an intellectual disability typically in our service system dependent on from us? Medical attention. Housing. Budgets, money management. Transportation. Food. Socialization.
Helping them cope.
Helping them cope. Managing their emotions. All those other kinds of things. I'm screwing you, Miles. Okay, yeah. Life skills, right? Now think about it. We've just taken every core function of a human being and made it dependent on their behavior. Do you think that'd be stressful? So what happens if you get thrown out of your group home? Do you see why the stress levels are so much higher? What happens if you tick off your case manager? What happens if you can't get along with your roommate now? You understand? So everything becomes contingent. Nothing is an inherent assumed right. I live in my house, I get mad, I scream and holler, I break something I own, I tell people to shut the hell up, I'm doing whatever I'm doing, but it's my house. I don't gotta leave it, do I? Do you understand? And I got people who love me, who are understanding that, okay, he's temporarily insane, leave him alone. Does that make sense? Now, I know that this organization is a whole lot different than a whole lot of other organizations because I've seen you go 120 miles past what most other organizations will do. I've seen that happen. But you know that there's a whole lot of people you're serving who got bounced out of other places that they used to be. Is that true? Okay? So what happens after you've been abandoned and rejected and abused and neglected and your needs don't matter, and the minute you are frustrated by those needs, that you have to leave? You see how that could be really, really stressful? Okay? So it's important for us to understand that people are coming with this really big invisible elephant called stress, called fear, called anxiety, called lack of trust. How many of the folks do you think that we're working with have been physically, sexually, or emotionally abused? Give me a guess, Jim.
Probably closer to 75%.
75%. What do you think?
90%.
90%. Jason? Yeah. Okay. I tricked you because I used all three categories, physical, sexual, and emotional, and the answer is 100. Because sexual alone is 80 to 90. Not good. Not good. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking if we know that people have been sexually abused, or we have a really strong reason to suspect that they have, we might want to figure out how to be a little more compassionate and try and help people recover from that. Do you think it would affect some of those other needs and sensitivities that we talked about earlier? I'm sure it would. And I know when we did this assessment on somebody earlier, it came through, didn't it? Showed up. And then at one point it just became, look, I don't care whether it's official in the record or not anymore. There's too much here that says we have the outline of an invisible elephant. Okay? And that's the point. I'm not going to be able to fix abuse. I'm not going to be able to fix history, but I can make today a better today. And I can make tomorrow a better tomorrow. And that's what matters. Okay? So, I want to talk about managing for tension and resistance. Tension is when the person wants something from us and we don't want them to have it. Okay? So, I want to think of a rubber band. Okay? So Jason, grab the other end of my invisible rubber band. Alright. Now, this is your rubber band. Okay? Now, but I'm saying it's yours, but really, I'm the one who brought it, right? You want it, and I say, no, you can't have it. What are you going to do? You're going to keep pulling, aren't you? What happens to the rubber band? Stretches. Okay? Gets more and more taut. Okay? Now, the rubber band might break, and now we've got a crisis. Or I might give up and say, oh, the hell with you, and now I've hurt him. Do you understand? Or it just continues to put stress on the relationship. And if I don't respond to a legitimate need that he's got, okay, does he want to work with me on other things? No. He may initially actually increase his cooperation to try and buy the thing that he's trying to get. Does that make sense? But if he finds out I'm still not going to let him go out and have sex or go out and drink at the bars at night or whatever it is that's really important to him, okay, that starts damaging our relationship. Okay? And that puts more stress in our relationship. And the higher the stress, the more likely it is you're going to regress. Okay? So, legitimate need, legitimate desire, all those other kinds of things, and that tension creates more stress. Okay? Now, I'm going to go back to the thing we were talking about earlier. I want you to do something. Tell me your name again, please.
Sarah.
Sarah, I'm sorry. And Sarah, I want you to do something, and you don't want to do it, okay? So, what would be your least favorite job to do?
Sanitation worker?
Sanitation worker, okay? So, as of tomorrow, you're in charge of hosing out all of the dumpsters at McDonald's. The bad news is you have to get in the dumpsters to make sure we get it all hosed out right. Okay? Now, that's your job, and you have to do it. Are you going to want to stay working at McDonald's? No. And the harder I push on you to do this job, what are you going to do?
The harder I'll resist.
The harder you'll resist, the harder you will push back. Okay? And in the process of the pushback, right? What are we doing? We're increasing stress one more time. Okay? So the harder I push her, the harder she pushes back, the more likely it is that we are going to damage the relationship. And so I want her to do some other things, and I'm not honoring her request to be allowed to escape this thing and to not have to do something that she feels is demeaning and is insulting and all those other things. She doesn't want to work with me on anything else, does she? So, stress, regress. Now you start avoiding me. Now you start fighting with me. Now you start saying nasty things to me. Okay? So what happens now? I increase your restrictions. Okay? Or you quit McDonald's to go back to a previous time. You regress to a previous age when you weren't working because you weren't able to work, you weren't competent to work, whatever the rationale or whatever it is, but you quit to avoid it. Okay? So she went backwards. Now the spike starts coming in when she's bored all day long. So now we've got to figure out how to staff that. And now we've got to figure out what are we going to do instead. Now she's got to go back to the workshop. And she hated the workshop more than she hated McDonald's. But you understand? Okay? So that's how this kind of fits. So what we've got to figure out how we do in order to reduce the stress in people is we've got to teach them those skills of stress management. We've got to figure out how to do that. We've got to help people have good relationships with people that care about them. Because number one way that we use to control our stress, what is it? Anybody know? Number one way in our society that we use to control stress. Thank you. Talking to other people about it. And most of those people are not people that are paid to be with us. Okay? We talk with our friends, we talk with our family. Okay? So the relationship part of this helps to bring stress levels down. But we've got to figure out ways to stop with the tension and resistance. So now that means I have to start thinking about how can I find ways to give you the thing that you're trying to get. So instead of saying no, you can't. Now I have to start thinking, how can I help him do this in a way that is healthy and safe and reasonable for any adult to do these things. But especially for an adult who may not have a lot of experience doing it. Does that make sense? Can he legally go to a bar if he has a disability, mental illness, developmental, intellectual? Absolutely, legally should be allowed to do those things. There's nothing that said he couldn't. So now it's my job, instead of saying no, to say how. How do I figure out how to make this safe? Okay? And how do I get away from the pushing somebody into having to do something that they hate doing? How many of you make your bed every morning? You got Miles. 1, 6, 6, 5. Yeah. What's that?
My wife likes a bed made.
Okay, so check that. Hear what he said. His wife likes the bed made, so he makes it. Okay? Is it an intrinsic value for him to make the bed? Is it an essential motivation for him to make the bed? No, absolutely not. But the helping others thing, I'm going to say that helping others even trumps romance and sex on that one. Although it does help with the husband points. But it's about relational peace, and it's about cooperation and those kinds of things. And that is a legitimate and valued essential motivator. Okay? So the fact that you don't care anything about it being made doesn't matter, because she likes it and you're willing to do it because it helps her feel better.